NBC's Garrett Haight covers the Trump campaign for us. Also with us, Boston Globe columnist and MSNBC political analyst Kimberly Atkins-Stohr, and publisher of The Bulwark, Sarah Longwell, who is also the host of the Focus Group podcast and executive director of Republican Voters Against Trump. Great to have all of you here. Sarah, this new ABC Ipsos poll has Harris leading Trump by 13 points. You've been talking to focus groups, I know, nonstop about this election. Is this what you're seeing from women you've been talking to?
Yeah, look, one of the biggest changes we've had recently in the election is the announcement of J.D. Vance as Donald Trump's running mate. And J.D. Vance has had a number of big missteps that have really made him radioactive to women. And one of the things you see in the focus groups, look, a lot of times the stuff we talk about in Washington doesn't always break through or translate to regular voters. But J.D. Vance's childless cat lady comments are absolutely resonating with voters. They come up in every focus group. Men bring them up. Women obviously bring them up. And I want to explain one of the big differences in how this election is different in terms of rhetoric around women than previous ones, because Trump's always been bad on women. But the fact is, this time there is a policy there's a policy up for grabs, right? Abortion is a big issue that it matters whether or not women trust Donald Trump and J.D. Vance. Before, it was just about rhetoric. Now there are policy implications, and that really matters. And J.D. Vance has done this thing where a lot of Trump's negatives with women, they're built in, right? They're baked in. People know about them in Donald Trump. But J.D. Vance has really sort of reanimated a lot of these concerns from women. It has highlighted the fact that Donald Trump is terrible when it comes to his rhetoric and his policies on women. And so voters are sort of retuning into that in a way that they had kind of, it had dropped off their radar. But J.D. Vance has put it back squarely into the conversation.
I find that absolutely fascinating, Kimberly. Look, we already knew, right, that Kamala Harris was taking the lead with women voters on abortion access long before she was thought to be the possible nominee. But now, exactly what their messaging is, which is broader than abortion, right? It's reproductive choice. It's reproductive rights writ large. And the idea that J.D. Vance and his comments on childless cat ladies playing into their response, which is you don't want them in your bedrooms or your lives or your medical decisions or your life decisions, is resonating.
It really is. I think it's a 1-2 punch, Chris. One, you're seeing the ongoing reverberations of overturning Roe versus Wade, which I think has set Trump already in a different trajectory than he was in even in 2020, when he saw an increase actually in white women voters over what he got in 2016 after the Roe decision, and Trump trumpeting and taking credit for appointing 3 of the Supreme Court justices that made that possible. We saw that change. When abortion access has been on the ballot, as it will be in November, abortion access wins. But then when you add this new dynamic of J.D. Vance, which you're absolutely right, it's not just a joke about childless cat ladies, as offensive as that was. We've seen him in comment after comment after comment that he's made over the years, really reducing the value of a woman to whether or not she gives birth, and even going so far as to say that movements for equal pay, for gender equality, or reproductive rights, or Black Lives Matter, or anything with respect to social justice is done by older women who are so miserable with their lives because they don't have kids. I mean, that is so profoundly offensive. A candidate has to speak in a way that the voters see themselves in their rhetoric, in their policy, in their message. And the message that J.D. Vance is saying is women stay away.
So, Garrett, people are starting to vote in a matter of weeks. Well, actually, I guess technically some of the ballots are going out this week. What's Donald Trump's plan to close this gender gap? Or is it just let's get as many men as we can get?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both, Chris. I mean, I think part of it is to hope, and to agree that it's a plan or a hope, I think is open to debate, that women will vote on issues beyond just reproductive rights. And if they focus on things like inflation, the cost of everything you pay for every day, if they focus on public safety, they can sort of push women back into the Trump camp who might have otherwise been pulled out of it by a focus on reproductive rights. It's why they don't want to be talking about that issue any more than they absolutely have to be, although Trump's interjection of a free IVF float, I won't call it a plan, but a suggestion last week, I think, is an effort to try to at least entice some women who are focused on that issue to take another look at Trump. And the other part of it is, as you say, jacking up the other side of this gender gap, which is to increase his lead among men. Now, the ABC poll we were just highlighting shows a smaller lead for Trump among men than Harris's lead among women, which is problematic for two reasons. Number one, there are more women in this country than men. And number two, women are more likely to vote than men. So they need to see that number on the male side of the equation increase substantially to come anywhere close to closing that gender gap that they have, the problems they have with women.
Sarah, in this new ABC Ipsos poll, polling director Gary Langer said this, quote, much of the moves among women and men have occurred among white people. White women have gone from up 13 points for Trump pre-convention to a virtual dead heat now. Trump up 2. White men from up 13 points for Trump before the convention, now up 21 points. Kamala Harris has already siphoned off Donald Trump's lead with white women. So is there a way to take that even further? Do you think there's even more of an opening potentially there for her?
I do. Look, and I think actually it's going to come from not just talking about reproductive rights, but having an affirmative plan on the economy. The fact is, the economy is still going to be the number one issue, and it is one of the ways in which, you know, a lot of times women are the primary shoppers, and so they're very price sensitive around the way that the prices of groceries have gone up because of inflation. But Kamala Harris taking an offense posture on the economy, talking about the middle class, talking about, I would say I have maybe some qualms with some of the policies she's put out there, some of her economic policies, but many of them are sort of ripped off from Donald Trump. They're very populist in nature, and they're populist in part because they are popular. And so some of that is allowing, like one of the things I hear in the focus groups all the time, especially from white voters, is that they've gone from being sort of closed off to Joe Biden to being open to Kamala Harris's pitch. They don't know that much about her, and so they're very interested in what she has to say. And I think that the way that she drives up those numbers is to get voters to buy into her economic message, not just her message about reproductive rights.
Garrett Haake, Kimberly Atkins Storrs, Sarah Longwell, thank you.